Welcome to Infringe at Your Own Risk.
Welcome back to Infringe at Your Own Risk with Rand Bateman. Rand is a registered patent attorney with decades of experience protecting patents, trademarks, and copyrights for clients from startups to international companies. I'm Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're talking about what medical device innovators need to understand before filing a patent application. Rand, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So medical devices are one of the most competitive areas in the patent world. What makes this field so technically demanding from a patent standpoint?
It's a really great area to be in and demanding because there's so much at stake, both monetarily. We spend a huge amount of money worldwide and in the U.S. in particular on healthcare. We kind of lead the world in innovation, in part because we spend so much in healthcare. I mean, and one of my arguments is that we kind of subsidize the rest of the world's healthcare because we invent it and then we sell it to them on the cheap after we pay for it. Mm-hmm. Just technologically, there's so much science involved. There's so many times that a small improvement can make very different results. You just look at years ago. I mean, when I was a little kid, you'd have a surgery and you'd be in the hospital for a week.
Oh yeah, easily.
And now you go in, you do a surgery, and 2 days later, it's almost hard to tell you had the surgery.
Yeah, you go home the same day. You're right.
You go home the same day. They did a laparoscopic procedure where they're going in through little tubes with instruments and taking things out or sewing things up or doing all of that. All of those improvements have come in large part driven by the patent system. Because if I'm going to spend $1 million creating a new way of doing something, or $100 million spending that, I can't do that if everybody else can just knock me off right away, right? If I spend $100 million developing, let's just say, the ultrasound, right? And I put it out in the market and 3 weeks later it's coming in from China, exact copy of what I've done, and I have no protection, then my $100 million just vaporized.
Yep.
And it's going to drive it down. And so the patent system adds the components together that says, look, go out, spend that money, create new things, and we will give you the right to that invention. And that's the big first step in the patent system. But the ancillary effect is you have all these other people who want to compete with that, right? Well, I can't do what you did because you have a patent on it. So what do? I try and design around it. I try and find another way of accomplishing that end without infringing your patent. And in the process, I go out and I create stuff. And if you look at the creation curve, it's just amazing since the early 1800s in the United States, how it's just exploded until now. You got so many fields where if you take 5 years out of your profession and go back, it's like you're going back 100 years.
Yeah, like you're starting over.
Everything changed. Mm-hmm. And technology is being driven in part because of our patent system. And the same thing with medical procedures, right? We want things to be better, but if I'm going to invest in getting them to be better, I need some protection. And then all of my competitors are going to go out and try and figure out ways. And some of them are going to bomb spectacularly and not do anything. But others are going to come up with an alternate or an even better way of doing what I'm doing, right? I mean, there's pharmaceuticals, right? We get drugs. That's great. Other people try and create a drug that accomplishes the same thing without infringing the patent. And sometimes we end up with drugs that are even better than the one that they were trying to circumvent the patent for.
Right.
So it's a great area to be in. It's a fun area for me. So I was pre-med before I came over to the dark side, and so they, it's interesting to me. It's fascinating, the technologies, and sometimes I scare my doctors when I have a new doctor because I'm looking at all the equipment in the room. Sometimes things that I wrote the patents on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that's fun when you see it, or
Yeah.
or it's the competitor to the one that we were getting around and
Right.
and made our invention, or the inventor's invention that I got to write out. So it's fun for me, but sometimes I think it freaks out the doctor when they first hear they have a lawyer in their office and he's closely examining their equipment. Um, Probably not what they want to hear at first.
No,
But
no,
it's
definitely not.
it's it's really it's really fun, and it's especially fun when you get to work on things that improve people's lives.
Hmm.
Right? I have no problem with people making a lot of money. Right? The guy who created stents that save millions and millions of lives every year, keeping people from having heart attacks and other medical problems. I have no problem that he's made hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars,
Hmm.
because he has improved everybody's lives so much with that invention.
That guy deserves to be a billionaire.
Yeah, I have no
Yeah.
problem with that.
Right.
Doctors go through an awful lot to get where they are, and the research doctors and scientists do the same. And if you create something that improves all the rest of our lives, more power to you.
With in this crowded field, as we've been talking about, if someone comes to you and they're developing a new device, what are you looking for to tell whether that idea might be patentable?
Well, the biggest question with a medical device often is, what can this do that the others can't? Or how does it do it better?
Hmm.
Okay. And it's one of the reasons, there's areas where the examiners do not give you much leeway on getting claims. You have to have something really different, significantly different in order to get a patent.
Hmm.
In most of the medical products classes that I've worked in, the examiners are much more willing to give patents for incremental improvements, because sometimes those incremental improvements are huge. If you can, years ago, I worked on a bunch of catheters. Um, this was fairly early on, and they were doing multi-lumen catheters where you could go in and do multiple different procedures. So we're sticking a tube in you, and then through that tube, we're going in and we're doing multiple different procedures at the same time. So we're sewing up a vein that's had a problem, or we're removing a tumor, or different removing a, a blocked artery or partially blocked artery, going in and removing the plaque that's built up that's occluding that. Um, it's it's incredibly beneficial. I mean, so many people who would have had open heart surgery and multiple bypasses 20 years ago are now going in and having a catheter put up, into their circulatory system through a small incision. Go in, they clean out things, they replace a valve in the heart. They can do all of these amazing things, um, and and the guy goes home the next day or the
Hmm.
same day instead of being in the hospital for 3 weeks.
Hmm.
And it's amazing to me. I just love seeing when I get to work on a patent and seeing it in practice in the field and it making people's lives better. So
Many medical innovations involve mechanical and software elements.
right.
Is there a way that owners or inventors should think about structuring an application for a patent when you're using multiple technologies like this, especially in a medical field?
Yeah, I think the importance is giving good broad disclosure, because you can always divide applications out, right? When
Hmm.
you file an application, often there's more than one invention in that initial application. Sometimes it's a method versus the apparatus. Sometimes it's the software aspect of an invention, and other times it's the hand piece, and then it may be something else, a sensor on the hand piece. and you put all of that into one application, and then you divide those out, because the examiner will often restrict them and say, well, the software is one invention, the handpiece is a second invention, and the sensors on the handpiece are a third invention. And so you'll end up with multiple different patents. It's called a divisional application. So you file your application, gets divided three ways. Now you have three pending patent applications that you deal with and protect those inventions. Sometimes they all kind of are necessary to be practiced together, but other times the improvement on the handpiece may apply to handpieces that have nothing to do with that type of software.
Mm-hmm.
And so you may broaden that out. And that often will come up in a situation where somebody licenses. You know, this is very important to our ablation tool, where we're going to go in and ablate and kill off a little piece of heart muscle that's causing us problems. But that same technology would be really good for somebody who's got some issue with welding two pieces of material together. Right? Well, that's not a competitor to me. So I can license a company to go out and start selling that other product.
Mm-hmm.
And I just get royalties. It helps to pay back my R&D expenses in developing my product. And it also gives the public another advantage from my invention that hopefully makes life better.
Yeah. And what should inventors understand about how examiners evaluate medical device claims, especially when this field has obviously a long history of similar tools?
It varies a lot by examiner.
Mm.
There are some examiners that are just wonderful to work with. And they'll call you out and say, look, no, I don't think this thing's patentable. But some of them will say, but I think this aspect might be in this context. And then you can go down with your client and say, hey, if we protect just that, are you okay with that? And sometimes you end up with a narrower patent than what you had planned on originally, but it's still effective for what they want to accomplish. Mm-hmm. Sometimes examiners will just dig in their heels, and sometimes they're not being reasonable. I had a case years ago. I actually took my son into an interview with an examiner, and the examiner basically was arguing that something that's rigid is flexible. And my son, who was about 12 years old, we walked out of the interview, and my son said, I don't think he understands what the word flexible means. It's pretty bad when a 12-year-old is critiquing your scientific ability as a patent examiner. But
as a patent examiner, yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness.
But you get that, and it's just you have to deal with their views on things. You get ones who are very cooperative. You get ones who aren't cooperative. I'm sure that they say the same about us as attorneys. Mm-hmm. But in the medical arts in particular, you've got to focus on what's your improvement and why are you, what do you need to get that improvement? Because if you can get that, even if it's a narrow patent, you have that advantage that makes your product more marketable. I'm the only one who can do this with that tool. Well, then that tool becomes advantageous, more marketable in the medical context. So
then when a device interacts with the human body, like surgical tools, implants, like we were talking about before, monitoring devices, so what additional factors do inventors need to consider when trying to show the design is truly useful and novel?
Well, the biggest thing is your function, right? And the end result. But you have to look at, and sometimes it's really hard because somebody will have a very similar structure that they're using for a different purpose, mm-hmm. right? And that can be really challenging to get a patent through because, here's my device, and then they pull up another device that looks almost just like yours, but they're using, they've got a sensor on there, but they're using it in a materially different way. Mm-hmm. And that can be really challenging. It's one of the reasons that you have to think through your patent application very carefully and what you're disclosing. A lot of people today are in the minimalist camp, which you try and disclose as little as possible other than just here's my structure, right? And then argue for patentability. I'm a little bit old fashioned in that I tend to put in more explanation about why things are the way they are. Sometimes that in theory could limit your claims down the road if somebody does a Markman analysis on your claims. But it can also, I've had numerous times where it's helped me, where I've come back and said, no, this is this difference. And the examiner says, well, so what? I say, this difference allows this function over here that we specifically addressed in the claims or in the application, right? We said, here's the prior art. Here's what it can't do. Here's our change, and it allows us to do this. And when you have something like that come up, you can point back to your specification, and then they say, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. That's a non-obvious invention. If you just start saying, you've just listed the components and not explained why, and then you get into an office action, they say, well, it would be obvious to change these. And you say, well, no, it wouldn't because, and then the examiner says, but that's not in your application. So I'm not going to consider that. So I think you have to be judicious as you do it. But I think there's often at times when explaining to the patent office the need that you're solving and that it hasn't been solved helps you get, I've had numerous times where that's helped push the patent through and gotten the inventor a decent patent, even though there was very close prior art.
And that makes sense to me. Why would people want to go a more of a minimalist route? That seems like the more information you can give as far as its usefulness would be a good thing, right?
Yeah, the worry is if you put in that language, then they're going to use that and try and read that into your claims. Oh, when you say this, it's only for this purpose.
So keeping it more general gives you a little more flexibility. That's the idea?
Yeah, it's just there. And then you argue, you haven't used language that they can use to limit the scope of your invention in court. But there's always a flip side to everything, right? And the downside of that is you might not get the patent, or it may be so broad that then you start bringing in prior art that you don't want. Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's got an annular ring. Well, so do these other things. And then I say, but I have an annular ring for doing this. And in light of the other prior art, nobody would have thought that, oh, I should replace this arm with an annular ring and that will solve my problems. And then they say, okay, in that context, it makes sense. The evolutionary path of your invention is explained through the change in function. And it's not just, oh, well, it has a similar part. Because sometimes the examiners, it's called hindsight reconstruction. The examiner just starts picking and choosing. Well, reference A has part A, reference B has part B, reference C has part C, and reference D has part D. And you're going, yeah, but who out there would have said, oh, I see A, B, C, and D. Let's throw them all together. Right? It's why you're getting there that's important. And especially if you look at, here's what the prior art was at the time of my invention. And in light of that, nobody would have thought that D would work, right? D was actually taught away from because they all said, you need to do this. And we're saying, no, you don't need to do that. You need to do this other thing that nobody thought was possible. So it's hard. It's years ago, one of the Supreme Court justices said that a patent is the hardest legal document to draft. And that's why, is because you're writing it today and it's going to be interpreted years from now in light of different technology, right? Because the technology is going to change between now and then. And then those words, when they read on a new device, does it infringe or doesn't it? It's, from what I'm thinking today, how would I try and get around this? What word can I use? Because it's very much a word game, and using the wrong word can make your claim too broad and invalidates it, or it makes it too narrow. Nobody infringes it. So,
and like we said in our last episode when we talked about AI, it moves so fast. So trying to predict what things are going to be like, especially in a world like medical devices with all the technology and how fast it's moving, really difficult to foreshadow on that one.
Yeah, and it's even if you just look at the information curve. When my mother had a degree in bacteriology. Okay.
Wow.
My microbiology class covered everything that she learned in college in about the first 3 weeks.
Wow.
Okay. And it's getting like that. I mean, my daughter's got a degree in biochemistry, and you could take almost all the stuff I learned in college, and it was like her first year.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, just things have gone so far beyond. It's just
Right.
constantly changing, constantly updating. And so good patent work, you've got to be thinking, what are potential alternative technologies, and how do I write this patent in such a way that I can have claims that are really defensible, I can have claims that are really pushing the envelope, and trying to pull it all together. But it's a fun area. I mean, every project is different.
That's for sure. It sounds like it. Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for today's episode. If you're developing a medical device or working to protect innovative technology, you can learn more about Rand Bateman and his work by visiting batemanip.com. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. We definitely appreciate that. Rand, always great chatting with you. Thanks so much.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.